it's great to see you. For today's lesson, we're going to be making some beautiful fall landscapes. First, we're going to learn about landscapes and different artists who've made landscapes, and then we're going to make our very own. So let me just plug in my camera and we'll get started. First, let's talk about, well, what the heck is a landscape, Miss Hans? Well, let me tell you, because I know you're dying to know, right? Well, a landscape is a picture of a large outdoor space of land. I love being outside, don't you? Many artists also love the outdoors and have made beautiful pictures of them. For example, Friedensreich Hundertwasser. He's an Austrian artist who makes very brightly colored abstract landscapes. Abstract means it doesn't look quite like real life, but you can still tell what it is. Like, can you still tell this is a beautiful hill in front of a gorgeous sunset? I love all his bright colors and designs. This artist, David Hockney, makes beautifully bright colored landscapes as well. He's from California, so you can see he's got the Californian coast here with roads winding through mountains right next to the ocean. This artist is a Bolivian artist who makes beautiful landscapes, including little buildings in the village that he lives in. This artist, she makes some really interesting landscapes. It's like the bottom part down here almost looks abstract with all these stems and flowers, but then you can tell in the distance that there's trees and houses. This is a great example of a landscape that has some things that are close up down here at the bottom and some things that are very far away, like the house or even the mountain, even farther away. In our landscape, we'll have some things that are near, far, and really far as well. This artist made a painting of Niagara Falls in upstate New York, actually near where I grew up. I love this picture because of the beautiful fall colors in the trees, but also because you can see two Native Americans standing right here on this cliff, and having the people in the picture so tiny really shows just how big that waterfall is. Also looks like there's a storm coming. Uh-oh, we better get out of here. And this artist is from Georgia. She grew up on a farm and she liked to paint the beautiful reddish brown dirt on the road that she saw when she was growing up. I love all the twisty trees. They almost look like Tootsie Pops. Ooh, now I'm hungry. This is Grant Wood. He was an artist from Iowa, so that's not too far from Minnesota. And once again, we see that some things in his picture are really close up, like this hoe digging in the dirt, and some things get further and further and further away, way off into the distance. The front part or the bottom part of the picture that includes all the things that are closest to us, that's called the foreground of the picture. Say that with me. Foreground. Things that are just a little far away are in the middle ground area of the picture. Say that with me. Middle ground. And things that are really, really far away and very small and very high up towards the top of the picture, that's called the background area. Say that with me. Background. Ooh, you sound like a bunch of little mice. This is an abstract landscape by Paul Cézanne, another beautiful, smooth landscape by Georgia O'Keeffe. There are just so many landscape artists. Now you're about to be a landscape artist. So let me show you what we're going to do today. First, you're going to need a half sheet of paper. And make sure it's the long way. Landscapes are often long, they're not tall. They can be. You're allowed to break the rules sometimes, but today, because we're just starting, we're going to do it the long way. Then you'll also need crayons for today's lesson, a permanent marker, and later on, you'll need your watercolors. That means a cup with some water in it. Ooh, my water looks a little dirty, but that's okay. It'll still work. And my watercolors. That tissue's in there for a reason. I'll explain that later because you might want to try that too. Oh, and I better go grab a paintbrush. Be right back. Get the paintbrush. Be right back. I'm coming, I'm coming, I'm coming, I'm coming. Hi, I'm back. All right, so let's get started on our landscape. We'll also need a pencil because we're going to draw it in pencil first. So we're using a lot of supplies today. Make sure you're not getting them all over the place. Make sure they're not too messy. All right, so first we are going to start. Actually, I'll show you what we're making so it's a little bit easier to tell. We are making a landscape that looks like this. A couple of beautiful bushes. Those look like sumac bushes. Those get red in the fall. A tree and some leaves blowing around. Some of the leaves are really small, and then ones that are closer to us are big. That's how we can tell that these ones are close because they're so big, and these ones are far because they're a little smaller. All right, so let's get started. We're going to start with our pencil and make the bush down here in the corner that we just saw. When I make bushes or trees, I use a bouncing line, and sometimes that bounce is little, and sometimes it's a big bounce. There. After we've made that bush, we'll make a line for the ground. Start on the edge of the bush and make that line go all the way to the other side of your paper, right off the edge. Awesome. Then we're going to make a bush that's a little farther away. Now, since it's farther away from us, it's going to look a little bit smaller. Start your line on the first bush, and we'll just make kind of smaller bounces so it looks like that bush is farther away. Now that we have two bushes and a line for the ground, we're going to make the tree over here. First, we'll start with the trunk and the branches. So down here on the ground, not right on the line, but a little below it, we're going to make a line that goes up, then zig, zag, zig, all the way back down. To finish the tree, down by the roots, I'm just going to add a couple more zigzags so it looks like those roots are going deep into the earth. This line right here is a problem though. The line for the ground shouldn't go through the tree. That makes it look like the tree is see-through. So I'm going to use my eraser to erase that little part of the line that goes through the tree. There we go, much better. Now that tree needs some leaves, so let's do our bouncing line again. Some big, some small, some medium. It can go right off the page even. I'm going to have it come back down around here. And inside that tree, we're going to draw a couple small leaves. To make a leaf, I make a line that curves one way and curves back, kind of like a little football shape. Just a couple leaves. And since it's fall, we know that the leaves fall off of the trees, so we can make some leaves that are falling or even on the ground. Do you like to make leaf piles and jump in them? I totally do. Even my dog does. Now we're going to draw some leaves that are blowing in the wind. And because those leaves are blowing towards us, they're going to look bigger. Just like when my hands are far from you, they're a little smaller. And when I bring my hands closer, they look a lot bigger. So right here in the middle of our picture, we'll draw a medium-sized leaf blowing in the wind. And then up here in this area, we'll draw an even bigger leaf that really looks like it's blowing towards us in the wind. Great. Now that we've got our picture done in pencil and we've erased any lines we didn't need, now it's time to outline everything in Sharpie. So find your Sharpie pen, and we're going to go right over the same pencil lines we just did, but now the Sharpie will make them darker. Looks a little more professional, and we can see our shapes better. Pencils for always the first step for a lot of artists, because if you make a mistake, you can erase pencil. But if you make a mistake with a Sharpie, you can't really erase it. All you can do is change it into something new. And that's okay too. When I was little, sometimes I would make a mistake on my picture. I mean, I still do, even when I'm older. And my mom would always tell me to turn it into something else, like a flower, or maybe a tree, or a line for the blowing wind. You can always change a mistake if you need to. And if you really don't like it, you can always start over, right? Lots of artists do that. All right, so now we're done with our Sharpie, done with our pencil. Those can go back in the kit so they're out of our way. And it's time for some color. Let's get some crayons going in here. We're not going to color in the whole picture with crayon. We're just going to add some details. So for example, for the ground, I'm just going to add a green line right next to the black line. And I'm pressing kind of hard with my crayon. And I only need to do that green line because the rest of that area I'll fill in with paint. Now let's get our brown. I bet you can guess what that's for. Yeah, the trunk. For the trunk, I'm going to outline it with a dark line. Outline means you go around the edge, just inside the black line. And then I'm going to color the rest in, but this time I'm just going to not press as hard, just kind of lightly so my hand doesn't get tired. Plus it looks kind of nice to have a dark outline and a light inside. Now, let's get some of our awesome fall colors out. Red, orange, yellow. These are also called the warm colors because they remind us of things that are warm, like fire or lava or the sun. So on some of my bushes, maybe I'll add some extra bushy lines to give them some texture so they look a little bushy, not just flat. Do that in the tree too. You can even color in some of the leaves. Maybe outline a little bit of the tree. And then for our special leaves, we're going to give them a little extra detail. So on a leaf, if you've looked really closely at a leaf, you've probably noticed they have lines on them. Those are called the veins of the leaf. The veins are like little tunnels in the leaf that carry water and good nutrients to all the parts of the leaf so it can stay healthy and alive. So using one of my fall colors, I'm going to draw those veins by making a line from one end to the other and then adding a V shape. Goes from the edge down to the middle and back up. From the edge to the middle and the other edge. Down, up, down, up. I like to give my leaves a little bit of a stem too. These leaves look like they're a little bit small, so I'm just going to color them all the way in. That's easier than trying to get my paintbrush in those little teeny tiny spaces. There we go. Looks good. Oh, and you know what? I forgot one thing on the ground. The ground looks kind of flat, but I want the ground to look grassy. So not the whole thing, but I'm just going to add a little bit of grass here and there. Just a little bit of texture so that grass actually looks grassy. Oh, wow, that really helped, didn't it? All right, now for our last step, we're going to paint. And if you're at home, you gotta make sure that you're really careful with your paint. I would recommend having a placemat underneath your picture like I do. It catches any extra paint that goes off the edges. You'll also need a cup with a little bit of water. It really doesn't take much water. And you'll need your watercolors with your brush. I hope your watercolors are a little cleaner than mine. The cool thing about crayon is that it's made of wax, which means it's waterproof, which means that even if we paint right over it, you'll still be able to see the crayon underneath. And here's how we paint. We'll start with the grass. Dip your brush in the water, scrape it on the edge to get the extra water out, and just the very tippy tip of your brush, just the very tippy tip, swirl in the paint. I like to say that brushes are like ballerinas. They dance around on their tiptoes, they don't scoot around on their butts. So, using just the little tippy toes of your paintbrush, let's paint that grass very carefully so we don't go outside the lines. I can paint right over my crayon lines, and they'll still show through. One good trick I like for holding my brush is instead of holding my brush like it's laying down and using the side of it to paint under here, make sure your brush is standing up tall, like I said, like a ballerina, and you're pulling it back and forth. Beautiful. Once you're done with the green, rinse your brush, give it a scrape, and now we're going to paint the blue for the sky. So we rinse, scrape, swirl it in the paint. Rinse, scrape, swirl it in the paint. If your brush feels a little dry or not enough color is showing up, get more water and then get more paint. Watercolors really need water to work. So if your brush gets dry, you gotta get it wet again. Watercolor paint should always be slippery. Slippery wet. Now sometimes there's a really dark area where there's a lot of paint, so you're gonna need to spread it out. Smooth out any of those dark spots. Careful not to get it in your tree. And if you do a little bit, honestly, it's just fine. Once we fill in the whole thing, trust me, it's going to look cool no matter what, even if it's just a little bit out of the lines. In fact, a lot of the artists that we looked at today, their art was a little more abstract. Remember that? It wasn't just like real life. So it's okay if yours looks a little different. A little more water, that's what I forgot. And last, my very favorite part, the beautiful fall colors for the trees, the leaves, and the bush. So rinse, scrape, and swirl in one of your fall colors, yellow, orange, or red. Now we're going to be doing some fun mixing of those colors, so I think it's actually best if we start with yellow. Swirl it in the yellow, that's the lightest one, and then we'll add more color on top. So with just the tip, let's fill in the whole tree with some yellow. If you get a little bit of blue in there from your sky, that's fine. Let's make our bushes yellow. And I'll even do my leaves yellow. Now don't worry, we're gonna add more colors on top of the yellow. So let's rinse, scrape, and let's do our next warm color, orange. While the yellow is still wet, if we add some orange, splotches over here, just doing all kinds of crazy lines. Then it really makes the tree look like it's bushy and full of leaves. Maybe I'll mix it in with a little bit of the yellow here, just on some parts. So I can still see some of the yellow, but there's orange mixed in. And a little orange on the bushes too. I want that to blend more, so I'm gonna get my brush wet. Ooh, that really helps it blend around. And last, let's add a little red on top. Rinse, scrape, swirl in the paint. Oops, stuck right to my picture. There we go. And I'll add a little bit of red in here too. Just using the very tip of my brush and just very lightly, it's almost like my brush is just dancing, just the very tip on the paper. Just little dots here and there. Not pressing hard, just a little bit. All right. Absolutely beautiful. Ladies and gentlemen, watercolor is a ton of fun, but we also know it can get messy. So now that we're ready to let our picture sit somewhere safe to dry, we need to take care of our art supplies. After you use watercolors, a lot of times they're kind of wet puddles inside. And if we just close the case and then it shakes all around, those wet puddles will spill on the inside and you can see what happens then. The colors may also mix together and then they get all dirty and gross. So, what I like to do to protect my watercolors is find a Kleenex, fold it in half, lay it down over my watercolors, and shut the case. Then it can go safely back into your pack and they won't leak everywhere. You might even get a really cool looking tie dye Kleenex out of the deal. If you have the space at home, you can also just leave your watercolors open and just let them dry overnight. And once they're dry, then they're safe to close. But mine aren't dry, so I'm putting in my Kleenex. All right. Thanks for painting with me today and learning about landscapes. I can't wait until the next time I get to make art with you.